record.
Well,
There we go. I guess I could have shared my screen before because
yeah.
things are falling on me. Um, I wanted to just chat through a couple things to give a little extra deets on like sometimes we can feel a little stuck with there only being certain ways to achieve health, and if we've tried different things that were really regimented, then in our minds we feel a bit attached to like, okay, the only way to get control of my food is to monitor and track and count every little thing that comes in. So the intention behind this is to kind of help us zoom out and realize that there's so many different things that impact our health, that we can have an understanding that calories count, but we don't have to count calories to find success. So just having a general, awareness that there's some foods that may be less nutritious, some foods that may be more nutritious, some foods that may be more energy dense or less, some may be more filling or less filling. And just having this general concept around these foods can be helpful in making choices around them, or even just understanding how our body is responding. Like, for instance, one thing that I see that comes up often is, say people are having breakfast and then feeling hungry at 10 a.m. and they're like, oh, I shouldn't, this is too early to be eating. Like, lunch is only at 12. I should only eat at 12. But then if we understand, like, oh, okay, the body, if we're eating things that are mainly refined carbs, the body digests that really fast. So then there's this release of glucose into our blood. So our body releases a bunch of insulin, and then it moves the glucose out of the blood cells. But then our body really thrives on glucose as energy. So then it creates these strong cravings for more because now the body needs to replenish the blood glucose. It's like sometimes even just knowing those little tidbits about how our body works can help, because then instead at 10 a.m., when our brain goes, oh my God, you shouldn't be hungry yet, it's not even lunchtime, oh my gosh, you have no control around food, all you can do is think about sweets, we can go, oh, this is what's happening. 2 hours ago what I ate just didn't fill me up and give me what my body needed to help me feel full for 5 hours. So it's not that there's anything wrong with my willpower or anything like that. It's just, okay, now I can maybe try adding fat, fibers, and proteins to my breakfast. And that'll help keep me fuller longer. So then instead of it being this question about our soul and our willpower, it's just like, oh, that makes sense because this is how the body digests that, and this is what the body needs, and this is how it's communicating to me. So that's off on a little bit of a tangent, but it just shows an example of how understanding the physiology behind certain things, the way our body works, the way our mind works, can help us make sense of the way it's communicating to us. Um, so I threw up a couple things up here that if we feel like we've been stuck in that little loop of like, okay, the only way to make positive changes in my life around food is to start weighing, measuring, tracking every little bite that goes into my mouth. If that has turned into in the past something that was a bit more cumbersome and obsessive, that there is other things we can focus on. And this isn't to like shame anybody who was using calorie counting as a tool. Like, it can be a super useful tool. I've tracked food for a while and learned a lot from it. I just want people to know that it's not the only way to focus on your health and fitness, so that you don't feel super attached to one specific thing, especially if it hasn't really worked well in the past. So, to simplify, because sometimes when we break food into calories and into grams of stuff, we get very like we get very granular and very specific about food, and then it can get really confusing. So we start breaking things apart. Instead of just eating food, we're now eating grams of carbs or 100 calories of this and 200 calories of that, and we stop looking at food as food. So it can get very confusing because we're breaking it apart into these tiny minuscule little bits and pieces. So I like to simplify nutrition as much as possible and go, okay, like when in doubt, when in doubt, just most of the time, eat a wide variety of whole foods and go from there. It's like anytime you're wondering, "Ooh, what should I have?" Just say, "Hey, in the last 2 months has most of the time have I been choosing a wide variety of whole foods?" And when we're getting lots of different variety, like different colors, different plants, then we don't have to worry about tracking if we're getting all the right like vitamins or nutrients or whatever. As long as we're getting a wide variety of different stuff, the body does a really good job at taking what it needs from all of those things. We know we're getting different nutrients from different colors. We know we're getting a mix of protein, carbs, and fats when we're getting a different variety of a bunch of stuff. So instead of feeling like we have to make it more complicated than it is, you just zoom back out and go, okay, most of the time, like let's just start with that. Most of the time, am I eating a wide variety of whole foods? And then another thing, I was on a call with a client today, and we were talking about this idea of consistency. And she was like, okay, so I'm going to do this. And then, like, once or twice a month, I'll have a food, like a meal where I just don't care. And so I broke it down with numbers to show, like, say we throw around like 80% consistency of most of the time eating whole foods. If we have a background of all or nothing thinking, we can feel like, okay, we can only eat clean, we can only eat foods that are whole food, organic. And so then when someone's like, okay, try the 80-20 rule or let's go for consistency, it's like, well, what does that look like? Like, okay, I can maybe have one or two, I'll call them cheat meals or off plan meals or whatnot. And then that also doesn't feel very fun because you're like, okay, I have a friend's birthday party in 2 weeks, and then you're stressed. Okay, that's going to be my one thing, and then your husband comes home with surprise takeout. But then instead of that being a joyous occasion, it's now like a panic. So we broke it down, kind of using some numbers to give a bit of a tangible thing. Like, all right, if say we're going to aim for 80% consistency of most of the time eating a wide variety of whole foods, what does that actually look like? And 80% is high. Like you could still see success with 60% of the time eating a wide variety of whole foods and then doing all these other steps that we were talking about. But if we're just talking about food, what would that look like? So let's say we eat like 4 meals a day. I like to call snacks meals, just mini meals. So say over a month, 4 meals a day, it's like 126 meals. And then if we're like, okay, 80% of the time we want to aim for a wide variety of whole foods when we can, that leaves 20% of the time we can have foods that don't fall in that category of the whole thing, like of a wide variety of whole and unprocessed foods. Anyways, but 20%, what does that look like over a month? That's 24 meals. So when you can see it in that number, be like, oh my gosh, okay, 24 meals throughout the month can be more flexible, and that's still giving me 80% consistency. And just hearing that number versus in her head before when it used to be like, okay, I can only have 1 or 2 meals and that's as much flexibility as I have, to break it down and kind of do the math. And we're not robots, we're not calculators. There's no like perfect numbers. Like you don't have to count out 24 meals that are not on your plan or whatever. But just to know that it's like, okay, 24 opportunities where it's like, you're still hitting 80% consistency. Like you can relax. Like that gives, I think just seeing that number of what 20% actually looks like gave her a lot more flexibility. So that being said, that's just kind of like an analytical view at this idea of 80-20 and what it kind of looks like in real time. But let's go on to a couple of the steps to getting healthier that aren't even really related to food, but have a really big impact on the rest of our choices around food. Well, the first one's kind of about food. But the place I like to start, often we start with what can I cut out? What can I get rid of? And then we end up in this like lack mentality. So we switch it around to let's add in more colorful plants. Aim for 6 handfuls of fruits and veggies most of the time. And that's like half your plate at each meal. That's a good like rule of thumb just to keep it simple to hit that most of the time. Eat a wide variety of whole foods. You'll notice 6 handfuls each day. Like it takes conscious effort and it is a lot. And some days you'll hit it and some days you won't. But that's where that flexibility comes in. Just most of the time, aim to get lots of colorful fruits and veggies in there, and your body will thank you for it. Because I think sometimes when we've maybe tried just counting calories, we start to associate food with calories and then calories with energy. So then we start to look at food as this is just fuel that either makes me gain weight or lose weight. And then we lose a little bit of touch that food is the building blocks of our body. It is energy, but it's also so much more than that. It's the literal building blocks of your body. It makes up your heart and your lungs and your brain and your eyes, your ability to think clearly and process emotion. We need food as the building blocks for our body. It's not just energy that makes us bigger or smaller. So, adding in more colorful plants is a good way to treat your body with respect in that way, where you're like, hey, I'm giving you the building blocks you need so that I can go and do all the things I like to do with my life. And I added a little note here that it's not too much it's not too much sugar, even if you had 6 cups, 6 handfuls of it being all fruit. Fruit it's got water, it's got fiber, it manages portions easier for you naturally because it physically fills you up versus something that is strictly just like refined or table sugar. It doesn't physically fill your stomach up, so it's way easier to overeat past what your body needs. But yeah, don't be afraid of fruit. Get it in, yeah. All right, now on to a couple extra things. A 30-minute walk outside. This hits home on so many levels. One, for some random facts, is you get the vitamin D from the sunshine, and vitamin D is like a very integral part of making serotonin, and serotonin is that like happy chemical in our brain. And so it's a literal mood booster to get outside and walk. And movement is hella important. Movement is not just to earn or burn food. Sometimes when we're counting calories, and then we have all these devices that show calories when we're exercising, we can then think of exercise as it's either making room for food or it's burning food that I've consumed. And I want to completely like eliminate that descriptor from our brain that exercise either earns or burns calories, and instead recognize that exercise is important for our mental health and our physical health and so many other things. So if we can just totally disconnect the link between exercise and burning food, we'll have a much healthier relationship around movement with our body. One of the things that I love about movement is I call it like taking the garbage out in the body. We have our lymphatic system, which brings our immune cells everywhere it needs to go. It takes out the byproducts so that they can get excreted. But unlike, our circulatory system has the heart as a pump that pumps and moves things along, the lymphatic system doesn't have this pump to move things. So it relies on your muscle contractions to move the lymph around your body. So think about that when you think about movement. Think about it as it's like you're treating your body to a little detox. It's moving the lymph, it's getting your cells where they need to go. It's not earning or burning food. So think of it as taking the garbage out. We need that muscle contraction. Even physical, like self massage and stuff, can help move the lymph along, like move the lymph around as well. And I always like to get the visual of imagine a swamp where water has been stagnant. It starts to get gross, it starts to get swampy and icky. Imagine that as your life force in your body. When it's stagnant, it starts to get swampy. It's like, would you rather on a hike go fill your water bottle up with swamp water or water that's been constantly moving down the mountain? It's crystal clear, it's been filtered, there's minerals in there. So next time you're moving your body, think of it as that. It's not just like burning through energy, it's literally healing your body and moving lymph along, taking the garbage out. So that's one of the biggest things that I like to, kind of create a different perspective on movement. Now, sleep is the kicker here that we tend to, what would you say it, idolize lacking sleep. Like, I only slept 5 hours last night and I'm still crushing it. It's like, we're not gonna, when we get burnt out, no one's coming around with like a badge of honor and being like, You did it. You didn't sleep enough and you burnt yourself out, like, rock on. It's not happening. So, since there's no prize at the end for, like, being able to do the most on the least amount of sleep, prioritize your sleep. Sleep is when the brain takes the garbage out. Just like there's a lymphatic system in your body, there's a glymphatic system in your nervous system that helps clear out your brain, and that is like twice as active while you're sleeping because it doesn't want to be getting in the way of your functions while you're conscious going about your day. So it's the brain's chance to take out the garbage. Like if you're ever dealing with lack of mental focus or clarity or brain fog, check in to see what your sleep routine is like. Sleep is also when muscle repair and muscle building happens. It's when like the human growth hormone is released the most. So if you're doing exercise and efforts to get stronger and get fitter, sleep is the second part of the equation. Exercise is only tearing apart the muscle, it's breaking it down, it's adding a stress. The actual getting stronger part happens when you're sleeping. That's when the muscle building happens. That's when the recovery happens. So if you feel like you've been working out and hitting a plateau or not going anywhere, it's probably because you're missing the second half of the equation, sleeping, so that you're actually building the muscle and not just continuously breaking it down. Water is always one we like to touch on too, because we can forget to drink water. And when we're talking about building blocks of our body is like over 50% water. So we need to make sure that we're giving it the building blocks that it's made up of. And sometimes we can get caught up in looking for what's the right answer? How much water are we supposed to be having? And I want to keep giving the power back to everyone of going, there's no you that's ever existed before. All the information that's out there, like even if it's good and science backed and whatnot, it was never tested on you. So take it as suggestions and things to experiment with, but don't ever ignore your body just because somebody else said that this is what's worked for them. Take it as a suggestion, give it a try, but pay attention to your body. So if you're like smashing water and it's going right through you and it's coming out clear and you're having a hard time holding it and you're uncomfortable and you're waking up in the middle of the night, remember that you're in the driver's seat. Don't feel stuck. It's like, well, so and so said I had to drink a gallon of water. And you have to take back your power and go, okay, someone said to try this. Right now, that's not what's working for me. So I'm going to dial it back a little bit. And you can go if if your pee's too light, slow down on the water. If your pee's dark and you're feeling thirsty, dial up the water. So you can start with half your body weight in ounces of water. But the biggest thing I want to highlight here is then adjust depending on what feels good for your body. All right. And then the big old bubble of stress, because sometimes we get caught up in just focusing on the food. And food is important. It's like what we're built of. But sometimes when we only focus on that and disregard everything else, like even our focus on the food, if it's something that's causing a damaging amount of stress, then it's not the best approach. Because even if we were counting every morsel and hitting whatever the calorie count is that somebody told us to hit, if we're chronically stressed out, our digestive process isn't working well anyway, so we're not even absorbing the nutrients in the right way. So managing your stress is paramount because our body still reacts as if it's in fight or flight mode. It can't tell if the stress is from something that might be a threat to your life, or it's a deadline at work, or it's something a coworker said that we're ruminating on. It can't tell the difference, so it responds in the same way. So if there's a threat to your life, your body's going to release these stress hormones because it's trying to prepare you to either fight or flee. And when you're fighting or fleeing, it doesn't give a crap if you're digesting your last meal. It's trying to get you to survive. So digestive resources are put on the DL. So if you're chronically stressed out with no tools to help you manage your stress, that means your digestive ability to uptake your nutrients, those building blocks for your body, that ability is diminished. So you may be stressing yourself out to try to like just eat clean, just eat organic. But then if your relationship with food is causing a lot of stress, it's almost a moot point because now you're not even properly digesting these things and you're having chronic inflammation anyways. So that's why you really want to focus on the whole picture. Now, I'm going to end the little screen share. Those are just a couple topics that I like to bring up because it shows us that there's so many different dials, so many different avenues that we can impact our stress and how we're feeling. And yeah, so I'm going to end the little screen share here, and then I can stop the recording here, and then we can